and I apologize. We should go through and just get people that have weather modification questions or people that have been involved, open the phone lines to meteorologists. Because in these films, they've got a lot of meteorologists as well saying things are going on that aren't normal. So the globalists want to play God because they're in a race with other governments for whoever can get the greatest super weapons. And most of the stuff that the free market created has been shelved. And that's another reason government is so incredibly arrogant right now. But you look at this hurricane, we would be weird to not say it could be government created as some type of disaster for the election. And maybe Obama's waiting to have a good response to it. That's not outside the realm of possibility. You know, my gut doesn't tell me that this is a manufactured hurricane. Katrina actually acted like that, the way even meteorologists said it sat there for a couple days and did nothing and then spun over. Very bizarre. But the point is, this stuff exists, so we've got to look at that. And joining us is filmmaker. He is the director and producer of the new film, Why in the World Are They Spraying? He's the founder and editor and CEO of Joseph Farah. Michael J. Murphy is a filmmaker, political activist, and president of the Coalition Against Geo-Engineering. His work focuses on issues that go beyond the interest of the corporate mainstream media and includes originating and co-producing the groundbreaking documentary, What in the World Are They Spraying? Several other short films that address chemtrails, geoengineering, and other controversial political issues. Michael has also appeared in hundreds of radio interviews, and he joins us right now. Okay, so you join us via Skype with better audio this time. Good to have you back. Recap what in the world they're spraying, and then let's look at why they're doing it. Just give it to us up front. Of course, all the interviews and proof are in the film, and what this signifies, what, from your research, the master plan is.
Well, there are a lot of master plans. In What in the World Are They Spraying? We really took an investigative look in exactly what specifically was being sprayed. And what we found was the primary ingredients of geoengineering programs, aluminum, barium, strontium, other heavy metals being found in rain tests from around the world. Very high quantities. In just a couple of years, we've seen quantities go as high as 50,000%. And we really illustrated in that form both the health implications, which are just unquantifiable, and then the ecological implications of these programs. And aluminum oxide is what the primary ingredient is. Geoengineers state that that's an effective metal to spray into the sky because they state it's very effective and very lightweight to stay up in the sky very long, but it's very harmful to humans. Since really the increase of these programs, we've seen aluminum-related illnesses such as Alzheimer's. In the Riverside County, we've seen over 260% increase of just Alzheimer's. We now have documented cases of people in their 40s with dementia, both Alzheimer's. Barium is very, very toxic to human health. When we inhale this, it gets into our system, and it lowers our immune system. So we can expect to see an increase of illnesses, cancers, other related problems. And then I've spoken to a number of physicians, some emergency room physicians, and during heavy spray days, the days that you see, the trails go back and forth and they completely turn our sky into this milky color, the emergency rooms are packed and people complain of irritability, headache, nausea, burning eyes. But being that barium increases our blood pressure, they stated they expect to see an increase of heart attacks and strokes during these. But the ecological implications, Alex, are just unquantifiable because, again, aluminum oxide and the other primary ingredients of geoengineering programs destroy our soils. And the scientists in Northern California noticed that the forests were collapsing, organic foods were not growing, so they started to investigate a bit. And initially, they did pH changes of the soil, and they found that the pH changes in that area, which is typically an area that has acidic soil, changed between 10 to 12 times the normal amount of alkalinity. Anybody with basic science realizes that when a the pH of a soil changes that much, you can expect any dye that required soil to grow, exactly what was happening. So they began to investigate further and again started taking rain tests. And again, the primary ingredients of geoengineering programs, aluminum, barium, strontium, which will change the pH of soil and actually essentially sterilize our soils, are being found everywhere. So again, these metals match a number of geoengineering patents, which have literally been designed to spray these metals out of airplanes. They match what geoengineers deny that they're spraying, state that they urgently want to.
Yeah, your Skype's breaking up. Maybe on the third interview that'll be the charm, but we're going to try to keep going through this with you right now. You may want to shut down any programs that are running in the background here with the filmmaker. This couldn't be a more important subject. It couldn't be a more important area to understand because, I mean, I was making a chemtrail film before you guys made yours. That's why I'm glad you made yours, because I was so busy I never got around to it. But expanding on this, there's hundreds of patents, and there's all these different agencies doing it, and they admit it's going on. They just are classifying the specifics, and they're trying to dominate the weather while manipulating our soils at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And weather control is a very effective tool to consolidate an enormous amount of both monetary and political power into the hands of a few. And if we go with geoengineers are stating they want to do this, for as they state, it's to mitigate global warming. So dispersing aerosols into our sky will block the sun. And, you know, we looked into that, and yes, dispersing aerosols into our sky will reflect the sunlight. So regionally, temporarily, it will create cooling. But we have found a number of studies, university studies, a couple of studies by NASA. Not that I'm a big NASA fan or believe everything that NASA puts out, but these studies indicate putting aerosols will, again, temporarily regionally cooling, but those aerosols act as a blanket at night and trap heat. And Alex, in the past 10 to 15 years, when these programs have really ramped up, we've seen a great increase in nighttime highs. So the question really that we've been asked is, why is this going on? A lot of people, you know, we connected a lot of dots in the first film. So we got emails, hundreds of them every day. And the answer isn't so simple. Our agenda can be fulfilled by putting aerosols into our sky, but weather control seems to be the #1 agenda. We met with, the first interview was actually with former 20-year weatherman Scott Stevens, and he explained to us how the aerosols work in conjunction with the storms.
Shop.com. Well, they're also manipulating the weather, and Aaron's actually got it in a big file. We did a special report on it. What was it, 1992? A scientist won a Nobel Prize for spraying aluminum dioxide in the atmosphere to manipulate things. NASA says the Earth's between 22 and 31% darker, especially over the industrialized world, with the trails. But they say, oh, the ice crystals are doing it. Okay, well, when I was a child, you watch the trail go by, you watch it dissipate in 30 seconds to a minute. Now I watch them sit there for hours and create a haze. And people say, well, it's special spray planes doing it. Well, we know government and corporations have those. And we know that's going on. There have been government programs with helicopters spraying, you know, white blood cells on cities. I mean, there's been all sorts of crazy stuff admitted. Releasing stuff in the New York subway. That's in the New York Times. You know, radiating foster kids, shooting people up with syphilis. I mean, we know secret testing is the byword of this scientific elite, this mad scientist cabal that runs the New World Order, and is slowly ending the natural order and creating this Plandopolis nightmare eugenics-based system. But how are they having regular jets? Because I'll see jets at the same level, even in hot weather, leaving condensation trails, but then I'll see one at the same level not. And then I find the patents where they add it to the jet fuel, so the companies don't even know. And the patent is where the aluminum dioxide in the kerosene, the jet fuel, is aerosolized by the jet engine to where perfect compartmentalization. I mean, most cities that put fluoride in the water, they really believe it's good for your teeth. They don't know it's an admitted chemical weapon. So from your research, how many different companies and groups are knowingly involved in this versus compartmentalized?
Well, we haven't gotten too much into who, and that's going to be the basis for my next film. But Alex, there are a number of companies that benefit and that are most likely involved. Of course, Monsanto is involved. And if you control the weather, you can literally consolidate an enormous amount of monetary and political power into the hands of a few, and we'll get into that. And it's precisely what the film was about. What we were saying before the break, what we noticed about 500 to 1,000 miles ahead of a storm. That's the days where you see the intense trailing, planes going back and forth, and the sky turns into a very milky color. So we went to interview 20-year weatherman Scott Stevens, and he explained to us some of the science behind some of this, and it's very simple science to control the weather. If you look at the main ingredient in geoengineering programs and what we're finding in rain tests around the world now, it's aluminum. Aluminum is a very effective conductor in our sky. So what they are able to do when they put up this heavy canopy of aerosol aluminum through the use of HARP technology or other technology, they literally have the ability to heat up our ionosphere or other parts of our atmosphere. And when that heats up, it actually creates a lift. And in that lifting of the atmosphere, it creates a low pressure vacuum. And they have the ability to literally steer storms into certain regions, or in the case of this summer here in the United States, out of certain regions. And if you look back at some of the science, and geoengineers are very open about the way that their aerosols react with water molecules. And I went to an aerosol research conference, spoke with many professors. They all told me the same thing, that geoengineering could be used to control our weather. So when they put those aerosols into our sky, normal evaporation that should occur does not, and we'll explain that in a second. But these particles act as what's called cloud condensation nuclei. So when the water evaporates, naturally it should connect with other water molecules, eventually condensing and falling as rain. They are not doing that. They connect with these fine metal particulates, and they drift. And that's one of the main reasons why here in California we're having drought conditions, because the water that should be falling here drifts over the continental divide, but it eventually has to fall, and that's the reason we're getting the intense flooding in the Midwest. Now, a real important part of this drought that we're seeing, there's no question that this summer we have an engineered drought. And many people thought they quit spraying because you look over California, over the land, we have had very few visible trails. But we looked at satellite off of the Pacific and from the equator all the way up to Alaska, heavy trailing, not any sun getting through to the water. So this is creating the drought in this capacity.
That's right. The last 16, 17 years since this really started in earnest, they've just been beta testing. Now they're getting it tweaked down. And as the State Department memorandum says, they'll use food as a weapon. They'll use weather as a weapon. Off by that break, that was a short segment. Continuing with the filmmaker, the director and producer of Why in the World Are They Spraying? You were getting into this drought being engineered. And Al Gore has said, pay him money for carbon, and magically Gaia will make it be wet again, and the Mississippi won't run dry. Give us your research, your evidence, the scientists you talked to in the film for this summer's drought being engineered.
Yeah, well, again, these particulates act as cloud condensation nuclei. So this summer, again, we are seeing the entire Pacific from the equator all the way up to Alaska sprayed. And to get moisture, we depend on sunshine hitting that Pacific and clouds condensing. So with this artificial coverage, we are not getting much evaporation, but the clouds that do evaporate now are attaching to the metal particulate that's being sprayed, and instead of that rain falling, it drifts. Alex, I did spend about 3 weeks this summer after Barry Kulski and I finished producing the film. Of course, the crops are just being devastated there. Everything was extremely dry. What I did notice, though, when rain was in the forecast, we would see these big, beautiful cumulus thunderheads developing, and then boom, we'd see the planes spraying back and forth, literally putting an aerosol canopy over the storms, and within about 45 minutes to an hour.
No. I've watched it in Texas where it's not planes landing at the airport. They fly in and in front of the front and kill it.
They kill the storm, it falls apart, and that moisture drifts. So without question. But, you know, the first time I heard about this, and once we started investigating, I said, why in the world would anybody want to control the weather? And we began finding monetary, like G. Edward Griffin said in the first film.
Oh, there's the Chicago Mercantile, the same one that has the carbon tax. They've now got a controlling the weather and predicting it fund.
That's right. So people now are betting on the weather. And what we found, Mike Agney, who is a trader at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, used the example as this. Through the use of weather derivatives, which many corporations actually use to offset the risk due to adverse weather. So they can essentially bet on adverse weather conditions. So if you have a crop, let's say worth $5 million in the Midwest, but you insure it through the use of these derivatives for $10 million, you have in a financial advantage if the crop fails. So what we're seeing, and what I found out, every commodity is driven by the ability to predict weather. And I'm not saying every trader who's trading these derivatives is in on this, but the people who are in cahoots, the multinational corporations who were aware of the drought agenda this summer, literally are making billions of dollars off of this drought that we have. And then we found out it goes much deeper to financial. Now we see that natural systems are being destroyed. Of course, we have the Hegelian dialectic problem reaction solution, which I hope we'll get into in this interview. But without question, there is a financial agenda behind these damaging programs, and some people are making billions of dollars at the expense of, literally, Alex, every living thing on the planet. So this is really, really serious. Some of the consequences of geoengineering: ozone depletion. We now have a huge ozone hole over the northern hemisphere. Drought conditions. We now have most of the world, if you look at the global drought monitor, most of the world is in drought, offset rain patterns. And geoengineers are very open about this. They state, if we start these programs, this is what we'll see. And what was most concerning to me was the statement that one of the people at the geoengineering conference made. He stated these programs, if they start them, which they obviously have, could disrupt the food supply of over 2 billion people.
And we have the globalists saying they want to cut the food off in the memorandums, like 200, State Department, to make us starve. Basically, there's a documentary that was voiced by William Shatner called Trinity, and it shows that world nuclear testing, and the U.S. did more than anybody combined, more than the Russians, the French, the you name it combined, the British combined. And yeah, Trinity and Beyond, thank you for correcting me, CJ. And in it, it shows over 100 tests firing high-powered hydrogen missiles, hydrogen bombs, into the upper atmosphere. And it shows old news clips, and they go, we're trying to blow a hole in the atmosphere to see if the atmosphere will off-gas into space. And I'm going, they tried to destroy our atmosphere. And it shows one night they detonate 20-plus high-power hydrogen bombs, and they don't do mushroom clouds in the atmosphere. There's these big, giant white balls. And next, we're going to try to blow up the Van Allen radiation belt. So they fire missiles into that. It's like it's mad scientists. Mad scientists are in control, and they're jacking with everything. And by the way, you say, you know, they say if they did this, it would happen. Bill Gates was just dumping stuff over New Mexico last month. They've got all sorts of testing. This has been admittedly going on. It's not like this isn't admitted because you keep adding the proviso of, yeah, they said this at this conference. I mean, they've got tens of thousands of admitted tests they've done. Go ahead.
And right now they're selling this to the public, so they're using the fear of global warming, stating, you know, again, there are some very serious consequences. It's going to destroy the ozone layer. All of these consequences, which, by the way, now are happening, but they say we are going to have to do this for the greater good of humanity because if we don't do it, everyone's going to die. Alex, this is about money and power. And what we're finding, again, we interviewed Barb Peterson of Farm Wars, and she alerted us to some things that are happening to the farms across the U.S., even in Maui. We're seeing ecosystems collapse. In natural organic foods are dying. This is not speculation.
Sure, that's what I wanted to raise to you. All in the last two films, you talk to countless scientists. They test the soil, but even mainline studies say all this stuff's going up. People call me everywhere, but I mean, I talk to old timers. There aren't as many birds. There aren't as many bugs. On the West Coast, the trees are dying. What's going on?
Well, this is an attack on life itself. And the reason, and what I found out living in Hawaii, where I go after I'm in LA, we live on an organic farm. We're dependent on natural sun, natural seeds, and rain, you know, natural systems. This is literally what every prophecy has been talking about, this big oppressive system. And I'll tell you what they do. Through death and destruction of these programs, they create what's called abiotic stress. Abiotic stress is everything that geoengineering creates. Is heavy metal contamination in our soil. It's drought, it's too much moisture, and it's fungal overgrowth, which is very deadly to crops. Geoengineering programs proliferate fungal overgrowth. So again, they create this abiotic stress, which, by the way, the EPA states that by the year 2030, we will see 50% more crop loss due to abiotic stress. And there is a company, Alex, and I'm sure you have heard of them, that has patented a genetically modified seed to address this abiotic stress. And that company is Monsanto. So through the death and destruction of natural systems, they come in with the solution to this program. And historically, farmers, after they planted a crop at the end of the season, they would get their seeds, use some of those seeds for the next season. Many of these seeds are what are called terminator seeds, and they will not regenerate. So that makes the farmer dependent year after year after year going to this company. Of course, we've seen sterilization studies that indicate a lot of other health implications with genetically modified seeds. And again, they sterilize our soil. So the farmers that we interviewed for why in the world are they spraying, one had seen a 60% decline in their ability to grow natural organic foods in the past 10 years since they've seen an increase of the aerosol trails from chemtrail programs. The other had seen a 70% decline in their ability to get yield. So again, this is... No,
I've talked to farmers and people that I know that do truck farming for their whole lives, and they say they keep thinking it's a bad year, but it goes on for decades where the weather is just never the way it's been, and it's all screwed up. And the media is like, well, yeah, you're not paying money to the government for carbon dioxide. You know, carbon dioxide's not natural; it's evil. But I mean, and then you learn we're in a carbon dioxide starved environment compared to when it's been. It's almost like the leaders are space aliens who are terraforming the planet to their atmosphere like they live or something. I mean, I'm not saying I really believe that, but that's almost becoming plausible for how destructive and psychopathic the people running things are. And then again, they admit, I mean, they had a 1978 UN treaty that we signed on to not do weather manipulation. But then they tell the public, oh, it doesn't exist. I mean, it's just crazy. We're living in a matrix.
Well, that treaty was the ENMOD treaty. And Dr. Nick Begich, who is in Why in the World Are They Spraying, explained an exemption. Countries can use this. The exemption was this. Countries can use this technology over their own soil. Scott Stevens, even Nick, spoke to us about controlling the weather. You can literally control weather thousands of miles away by putting aerosols into one area of the Earth, actually manipulating the jet stream and having the affected outcome of what you desire, again, thousands of miles away. So when you manipulate weather, it doesn't get to the border of the U.S. and say, oh, you know, I can't go any further because there's an ENMOD treaty. So that appears to be the loophole in this. About the genetic modification, this is, again, genetically modifying every natural system, including forests. We now have a company called Arbigen, which is genetically modifying forests. What this is, Alex, when I go back to Hawaii, we grow our food naturally. We are not dependent on the corporation because we're dependent on nature. This is an attack on nature. And through the death and destruction of natural systems, these corporations literally usurp the authority of nature or the authority of God and bring it under corporate authority so that it can be controlled by these corporations, which are controlled by these entities. And that's what this is. Again, every major religion has spoken about this, and we are the ones that have been called to address this. Alex, I'll tell you why. We still have natural systems, but they are dying very quickly. We are still getting some...
No, it's a monopoly. They're going to make it where the Earth can't naturally live and we can't naturally produce. That's their plan. And then we have to go get a genetically engineered baby or crops to live. It is a total monopoly takeover. by the eugenicist, and it's all there. The reason we never made our film, going back 4 or 5 years ago, was we just year after year compiled rooms of documents and proof to where we couldn't even present it all. It's so nightmare. Go ahead.
Sorry for cutting you off. It's almost like we're living in a sci-fi movie. Alex, these elitists, I like to call them many different things, which we shouldn't say on air, they want to be the source of life. So through death and destruction, they are disaster capitalists. And again, they have this godlike power. And that's why we're seeing these really ridiculous things. So, you know, this issue goes so deep. Barry and I could have made a film that was literally 20 hours long in addressing many different components. We decided to go with weather control, because it appears to be the #1 agenda, but it also outlines the basic principles of these programs, which again is to destroy natural systems so that these corporations...
It's unbelievable, but if everybody... See, things that are so big and so horrible tend to just keep going on because no one can believe it's happening. But if everybody saw your film, if everybody out there got an issue going in their local area, enough people within the system are going to be able to turn this around. We've got to force this out into a public debate. 5 years ago, you'd talk about this and get laughed at. Now the White House science czar comes out and admits they're looking at doing it and always pushing it like it's a good thing PR-wise. Because